I'm not sure if we have realized the threat that came from the EFF towards Ramaphosa's ANC. So I want you guys to watch a video of Mr. Floyd SHIBAMBU explain and express that if the ANC doesn't change the way it's behaving, the EFF is going to be treating it like an enemy and not just a political opponent, but an enemy to black people and an enemy to South Africa and the struggle and the liberation of black people. So I want you guys to watch Mr. Floyd SHIBAMBU so you don't take my words out of context. There is the man himself.
We as the economic freedom fighters want to state clearly here without any fear of contradiction that we are opposed to the coalition of the neo-colonial and neoliberal forces with the liberation movement in the name of the so-called government of national unity. We believe that the liberation movement and all the progressive forces should have risen above their subjective political conditions and build unity of forces whose umbilical cords are buried in the same yard and constitute a progressive government premised on the values and aspirations of the Freedom Charter, progressive internationalism, and a commitment to redress the imbalances of the past brought forth by colonialism and apartheid. We have not yet concluded, Chair, that the liberation movement has totally crossed the Rubicon into enemy territory. It is, however, on its way there, and when it is there, we will treat the liberation movement as an enemy force and not as a political opponent. There are voices in the liberation movement that can still be rescued on its way to enemy territory where we're going to treat it as an enemy force. Now, the National Treasury has got a legislative obligation and constitutional obligation to coordinate South Africa's macroeconomic policies and accept the production of research papers. There is nowhere where National Treasury has got to coordinate and guide macro and microeconomic policy in a manner that is going to achieve not only the expectations of society as a whole, but its own medium-term strategic framework objectives and commitments. In their own MTSF commitments, there's commitment to strengthening of the municipal finance systems. But 173 of the 257 municipalities are in huge financial distrain, and their budgets have collapsed. They have got a commitment to reduce wasteful expenditure and fruitless expenditure, but all of that has collapsed. The National Treasury has got an obligation to promote localization and industrialization through its procurement power. But there is no localization or industrialization that is happening due to the buying power of National Treasury. There is no regulation that commits, that binds those who procure on behalf of the state to procure locally and locally produced goods and services. It has got an obligation to stabilize the debt to GDP ratio. South Africa currently expends more than 380 billion rands on debt service cost, which is the biggest expenditure item in the budget of the state. More than any other expenditure in education, in healthcare, in the security services. It's a dismal failure out of its own obligations. National Treasury has got an obligation to combat the use of tax havens as destinations of the wealth that is generated out of South Africa. Up to so far, after we had raised it, it's more than 10 years now. There's not yet a coherent and cogent policy position and legislation to combat the usage of the tax havens and illicit financial flows.